Are you in the market for a sub $2,500 dual suspension mountain bike? You won't want to miss this episode. Today, our crew are going to be putting these 5 bikes to the test to see just how they stack up. Before we get into our reviews and opinions on the bikes, we would like to take a moment and just thank the sponsors. As I'm sure you guys are all aware, the economy and the bike industry are all having a rough time right now, and it's even more important that brands are helping us support and make these types of videos. So we would like to extend a huge thank you to Liat for protecting us and of course kitting us out, as well as to Fosi for giving us some quality eyewear that is also very affordable. So if you're looking for affordable riding gear and eyewear, make sure you guys check out Liat and Tifosi, as they got a ton of products. Thank you guys very much for the support. Let's get into the bikes.
For this year's budget group test, we've got a selection of 5 bikes, all of them 29ers, but 4 of them in the trail category, and then 1 enduro bike. Starting off, we've got the GT Sensor Sport, the Marin Rift Zone 2, the Ari Cascade Peak Elite, the Trek Fuel EX5, and last but not least, the Polygon Colossus N7. Now let's see what we got up to on them.
So with the introductions out of the way in no particular order, we're gonna go over each one of these bikes from left to right and give you guys some of our impressions and what stood out.
Starting off, we've got Trek's Fuel EX5. This is a 130mm rear travel, 140mm travel, trail all-rounder bike really. Aluminium frame, probably the highest quality frame on test, I would say. But then the componentry of this $2,499 bike maybe left a little to be desired. Up front, we've got RockShox's Recon Silver, 140mm travel like I mentioned, then the rear shock is X-Fusion's O2. You've got a set of Shimano brakes on there, an Alex Rims wheel set on there with a Maxxis Recon 2.6-inch tire spec, and a Shimano Dior 12-speed drivetrain.
Two things I'd like to throw in.
Yeah.
It's got extremely wide wheel set and very high volume wide trail, I guess if you want to call it that, still 2.6 tires, which it was interesting for us to see because we've, I think, gravitated away from that trend a little bit. So it was interesting to see. Second thing to note for me was that this surprisingly was the lightest bike at 34.9 pounds, I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was interesting and something we were a little surprised on, just kind of looking at bikes and specs. So Travis, you want to kind of run us through your highs and lows and what you thought about the bike?
Yeah, I think I was excited about, just hopping on a Trek. It's a good platform, obviously. The frame looks good, and like you said, it's the highest quality frame. I think that the tire, or the wheels, like you mentioned, they just felt slow rolling. They're big, they're heavy. However, that paired with the really wide tires, like wider than a tire that I've ridden in quite a while.
Yeah.
I found that actually had pretty good grip. I think kind of like across the board, the brakes, I wanted more powerful brakes.
Okay. How about as far as geo? It's as far as like reach and head tube angle, any other spec things?
Yeah, so geo reach on it was 475, which was great for me. Definitely does not feel too long. I think it's the shortest bike that we have.
Yeah.
As far as reach goes. Geo, it's also the steepest, 66.5 on the head tube angle. And that definitely did put you, it made me feel like I was over the front a little bit more, and maybe made me bring it back a bit while I was descending, not go as fast. So yeah, I think like wanting something maybe around more of the 65-ish would have been better, a little slack.
For sure. Worth noting also that this has got geometry adjustment built in, so with the Minolink flip chip you can slacken it out. We were in the high position, which I think is just slightly better suited to the overall nature of this bike. I don't think if you really dropped it and made it any slacker from what Trek gives you the option to do, it's gonna push things kind of aggressive enough to the point you're gonna find that much benefit from it, but still nice to have, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, any thoughts from you on the Trek?
I'd say the biggest downfalls for me would be that RockShox Recon fork. It's just not enough to whereas like the GT, the Recon feels pretty good.
Okay. 475, right? How tall are you?
5'8".
5'8", okay. So he's a little shorter than the rest of us, so he kind of had to compromise a little bit of geo, but where did you think that felt for you size-wise?
I thought it was fine, especially with maybe where this bike is more geared towards, where I'm gonna go out and probably put in some miles on it. I didn't mind a longer reach, and frankly, I didn't feel like I was like stretched out or anything.
Okay. And I'm 5'11", 6'2", 6'3"-ish got over here. So overall, we tried to find a happy medium for all of us. But I thought that the geometry similarly was a little conservative for gravity biased riders, which I think most of us are, right? Like we definitely go out and put miles in and we'll pedal, but we focus our fun and energy on the descents. And I think that steeper head tube angle, while it did make the bike climb really well, combined with the suspension platform and easily accessing that pedal switch.
But that's worth pointing out, right? I'd say this frame out of a lot of them is the worst pedaling platform frame.
Okay.
Unless you're using that climb switch.
Yeah, I was definitely using the switch quite a bit because it did get a little soft when you're really putting the power down, but the Geo definitely made it a pretty nimble and playful handling bike in general trail riding application. And I think maybe before we go too farther into this thing, we should probably preface it by saying that like we definitely are more descending focused riders. So some of our personal selections and preferences might be geared towards a little bit more, I don't know if you want to call it extreme or downhill focused terrain, but we're definitely going to be focusing on what we think the average consumer is going to be putting these types of bike through, both like skill, terrain and trail wise, right? So I think Trek did a good job making an all-around bike here, but it's just got some very stiff competition. Now, I know you guys are interested in budget bikes, but speaking of budget, it doesn't cost anything for you guys to subscribe to the channel, so please hit the button, do us a favor. Thanks.
Oh man.
So glad I got that. You okay?
Moving on, we've got Marin's Rift Zone 2. This is a $2,299 130mm and 140mm travel bike. Up front, you've got a Marzocchi Z2, and in the back, you've got a RockShox Deluxe shock. You've got a set of Shimano 2-pot brakes, kind of non-series ones, a Shimano 12-speed drivetrain, and yeah, again, fairly budget spec, but for me anyway, quite an impressive performer overall. Sean, do you maybe want to lead out with your first impressions on the bike?
Immediately, I'd say it was probably one of my favorite to climb. Just super nimble, and I felt like it put the power down pretty well. And then going downhill, I just immediately noticed that it was super playful.
Yeah.
Just wanted to hop, skip everything, put me in the ground once, you know. And then, I mean, the spec choices were pretty solid too, I'd say. Probably one of the better of all 5 bikes that we have out here right now.
Yeah, on my end, I really liked the Marin a lot. Kind of to mimic Sean, I thought this bike was extremely playful. I like to hop and try to, pre-jump or air stuff out, and the short rear end, shorter than some of the bikes, namely the GT, which I think is probably the closest competitor, definitely made the back end of this bike go anywhere you wanted, whether that was to pick it up and snap it into something or try to find a little pocket hip landing, whatever. To me, the pedaling was pretty good. It didn't stand out great one way or another, but it was good enough, and I was more than willing to take the weight and the pedaling performance for how much fun it was. I thought the suspension was also very plush. It was a very supple feel and a very lively feel. And another thing, right, getting into it, the suspension on so many of these bikes was very different, often front to back. And that was something I guess we could touch on later, but trying to get rebounds and to link up with what the fork was doing and the shock was doing on these was so hard. Like we would have one rebound fully closed and another one fully open, and they felt like they were still so far apart. But This bike I thought did one of the better jobs of balancing front and rear suspension, and I think had a lot to do with why I liked it so much.
Yeah, out of the trail bikes for sure, this has got the suspension package that has the best adjustability. Even though most of these bikes have the same number of adjustments, I think the Marin just had ones that actually made a difference and worked and let us all get to the right kind of spot. Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention in the specs is the wheel set and the tire combo on this thing, which is something that I think for me was a slight drawback. So you've got a Marin aluminium wheel set, which is solid, but then that's fitted with a set of V tires, and those V tires are kind of gravity oriented, soft rubber, fairly burly carcasses. I think that adds a lot to the overall weight, and it makes this bike one of the slower rolling in the group, I think. And for me, that really minimized the amount of efficiency I was able to get out of it when I was pedaling it. Obviously, it comes with benefits on the descents. You're getting more traction, more durability, so I can understand why they would put it on there. But yeah, certainly for the mellower miles, just covering wider ground, I'd be looking to swap out the tires for something faster rolling personally.
Yeah, I think we were talking about like maybe at least doing the rear tire something a little faster rolling. For me on this, I liked, or I guess I was concerned initially because it has the 485 reach, 5.8. That's pretty long for me. But maybe it's that combination of the short rear end with the long reach. I felt like it wasn't too long. I could get the front end off the ground really easy. It was active, it was playful, all of those buzzwords we're not supposed to describe a bike with. But no, I really enjoyed it. It was nice to not have to fiddle with suspension. Like you could set it and you felt like the changes that you made actually did something. Yeah, I felt like it was a bike that just kind of did everything well.
So next up, let's move into the GT Sensor Sport. Retailing for $2,300, the Sensor Sport is another 140, 130 bike. It's got a Recon silver fork and an X-Fusion rear shock. Drivetrain is a little interesting. It's supposed to come with microshift. However, we had a microshift 10-speed. Yeah. Our bike came with a Shimano Dior 11-speed. We didn't quite get an official word on why that was, but we thought we'd point it out. Tektro brakes, WTB wheel and tire combo, which was definitely the source of a lot of discussion. Not very many bad ones, just a lot of discussions, period. I think generally a pretty fun all-around bike. Robert, I'm not going to let you lead this off, okay? Because I know you're just going to steal the show here. Travis, I'll go to you and let you take it away first.
Yeah, I mean, Robert talked this bike up so much that it was hard not to have fun on it. But no, I think it has a very upright feel. That could be because of I think they're 30 mil rise bars, which is higher than all the other bars that come on these bikes. And so it did just put you upright, made the front end easy to pull up. The tires, I can understand, they were fun. You get loose with them. But ultimately I would want something wider. I would want something with a bit more traction. However, with that said, somebody that's maybe taking a bike like this out, is this an okay spec for them tire-wise? Are they gonna have fun? Yeah, probably.
Okay. I gotta say, and I'm sorry, GT, this was the bike I was least excited about riding. I looked at it and I frankly was kind of like, wow, like a lot of these bikes don't look like they cost under $2,500, right? And then that bike, lots of stuff screamed budget.
It's that baby blue paint job, isn't it?
I don't know if that's it, but gosh, I was like, man, this thing's not gonna do well. And I think a lot of it had to do with the wheels and the tires. But I gotta say, I got on there, something that was like very small and neat, and I didn't even notice for a while, was the little sag range decal down there. I think that's something that's really handy, especially for like this price point of bike. I mean, it would be great on all price point, but especially for maybe newer riders, knowing in millimeters what you should set up for optimal riding performance was really great. So yeah, I will say, I wasn't expecting a lot out of this bike, and Robert, you got on it first, and I very quickly was like, maybe I was judging this book by its cover and I was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I am as surprised as you are.
Okay.
I was kind of forced to ride this bike just based on what we had available at the time. I got on it and pretty much immediately I was like, oh, actually this thing rips. The tire spec is not going to be for everyone, but I think at this price point of bike where you've got things like the suspension capability, the brake power that are ultimately going to limit its maximum performance on the descents.
You were definitely pushing it though.
Well, yeah, okay, I got loose a time or two, but I think they kind of match the capabilities of everything else. If you put like a super grippy tire set on there, then you're going to feel like the brakes are underpowered. If you put, you know, something that lets you push a bike faster because the tires are naturally letting you do that, the suspension's going to get overwhelmed. So for me, having a fast roll-in tire set like these makes a lot of sense when the rest of the bike's capability isn't necessarily going to be the maximum that it could be. And yeah, I just kind of got into that mentality of I'm going to push it as hard as the tires let me, and I had so much fun.
Okay, all right. Sean, thoughts on the GT?
It was probably my favorite to climb. Like being 6'2", the tall riser bar was just super comfortable, like most upright position. My back hurt the least riding this bike. 2 laps on whoops and I was totally fine, whereas like something else I'd be hating life the next morning.
Okay, all right. Yeah, the upright position was nice, uphill and downhill. I guess there are downsides for very steep, techie climbs, you know, with that front end lifting, but overall, I think the comfortable position a lot of people will be in will be very appreciated.
But then I think because it's got the longest rear end on test, it kind of
Balances
offsets
out,
that.
yeah.
It all balances. You've got like a nice neutral riding position and descents, kind of a lot of balance between the wheels, and it all helps to just let you push that a little bit faster and harder.
I would say that one of the only drawbacks is with this Formula hub. The engagement points are just few and far between.
So few and far between. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
So shifting underpowered downhill is nerve-wracking.
Shall we move into the Polygon Colossus next?
Absolutely. The longest travel bike on test, 2,299 pounds, dollars. You know what I mean. But currently reduced considerably on Bikes Online, and an absolutely ridiculous deal at the moment. Still pretty damn good value when you consider its RRP as well. You've got proper adjustable high quality suspension on there, RockShox Zeb and Super Deluxe package. You've got a Tektro 4-pot front and 2-pot rear brake set that worked pretty well with the 200mm rotors on there. A nice wide 35mm in diameter or inner width rim, which is burly and suited to the 2.6-inch tires, and then another Shimano 12-speed drivetrain on there. Travis, you spent quite a bit of time climbing this bike, especially. How does that feel for you?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's no surprise at almost 40 pounds, probably close to 40 pounds with pedals. It's a bit of a slug when you climb. Obviously, that's not what the bike is made to do. If I'm gonna be choosing one of these bikes to go ride long distances and do a bunch of climbing, like the Polygon's not gonna be the one.
But if you're gonna go do a shuttle day.
If I'm gonna go do a shuttle day or go ride the bike park, I mean, absolutely, that'd be a great bike for it. And being that it was also, I believe, the most inexpensive bike on test, has a really good build. You know, if maybe the brakes weren't up to snuff, it's not, you still have a lot of room in your budget to be able to upgrade brakes. And kind of that's about it that you would maybe need to do on it.
Yeah, this bike, you know, and I think we were kind of all talking about it, you know, when you're just looking at the bikes and thinking what a sub $2,500 bike would look and feel like in your hands. That to me is the bike that feels and looks the least like a budget bike out of the group, right? I think the paint and the finish is pretty dang nice. The color, the kind of holographic decals is cool, but when you just look and you see that RockShox suspension on there at like that level, you know, you just look at all this other stuff and you're like, oh, that bike must be way more expensive, right? I mean, it's definitely in another category travel wise, you know, and some of you guys might be saying like, well, why is a long travel enduro bike in with a bunch of 130, 140 bikes, and it was like, well, because we had it and it was in the price point and we really liked it, so that's why. But I think it's not an amazing climber for sure. It's heavy, it's got a lot of travel, but conversely, it is, to me, the most capable descender. It is the only bike, well, not the only, but it is definitely the bike I would choose if I had to pick, and I'm gonna go to the bike park or I'm gonna go ride some big gnarly trails. If I wanted more travel and more squish than what these bikes offer, like, that's a really good bike, period, right? I mean, even if it was $3,500 or $4,000, like, I mean, the spec dollar-wise might not add up, but it rides as good as a $3,500 or $4,000 bike.
Right. That suspension platform is still okay when it's not locked out, right? But then you do have the option to lock it out there, just help that efficiency and offset the fairly heavy weight. But yeah, it's definitely impressive what Polygon's done with that thing. Sean, how about you?
You had a pretty big smile in a few sections of trail.
I did. It was the most comfortable riding bike, at least for our Oak Ridge visit, that it was unmatched.
All right. Anything from you on the Polygon?
Yeah, just like you say, in terms of the money for the spec and the overall look and the feeling of quality, that thing is just incredibly impressive.
So finally, we'll touch on the Ari Cascade Peak Elite. Weighing in at 36.2 pounds and retailing for $23.99, the Ari was, I think, a really good looking bike. I like the color combo. It's got a DVO Diamond D3 fork and the Opal rear shock, which was definitely unique amongst the sea of mostly almost all RockShox forks and some, X-Fusion rear shocks. We've got Tektro Gemini brakes on there. Maxxis tire spec, which I thought maybe was the best tire spec for this kind of style of riding, and some WTB wheels. Shimano Q's drivetrain, which I think is a pretty solid option. Not the fastest, most precise shifting performance, but again, at this price point, right, and we're talking about this style of riding and rider, it maybe forgoes that snappy, fast racer shifting for longevity and durability, and more smoother, reliable shifting for people who maybe aren't super on it with maintenance, cleaning, micro tuning, cable adjustment all the time. So I think there's some good calls on spec there. Travis, let's talk about the Ari.
I liked the Ari a lot. I know that there was some trouble maybe with suspension and whatnot, but for me, I got along with it really well. I thought that the bike pedaled really good. Is probably, if I was going to choose one of these bikes to go pedal, that would be it. I thought that it was the best climber. I agree. I really like the tire spec on it. Having the Aggressor as a rear tire, I knew how it was gonna respond. It's a fast rolling tire. I know when it's gonna lose its traction in corners and whatnot. I did notice the seat in between my legs more so than any of these other bikes.
Okay.
So that was kind of an issue. Again, I'm shorter. Maybe if it was a medium frame, I wouldn't notice that.
For sure.
But even having the seat down all the way, I could still feel it, between my legs more so than any of these other bikes.
Yes. Yeah, I think probably to your point, the size medium, which at 5'8" would have been more appropriate than the size large. But I do remember in Oak Ridge seeing a pretty big smile and seeing you hop and bounce around on that bike.
Yeah,
though.
that was fun.
Yeah.
I'll just touch on the suspension issues that we had. I don't know if we just had faulty units or if it is a particular tune or whatever that DVO's gone with on these units, but neither of them felt like they were, the fork felt slow, even on the fastest rebound setting when it was set up with the correct spring rate for you guys, at least the rebound just feels incredibly slow, which I don't know if is a safety thing, like more budget, less experienced rider maybe needs a slower rebound to be safe, but regardless, it didn't seem right. Just didn't quite inspire confidence and didn't feel super supple and controlled really overall. And I think really just took the performance of the bike down a little notch.
Yeah, I'd say you're right there. There was definitely areas where this bike did well, and we have definitely tested, reviewed, and really like a lot of the other Ari bikes, especially like the Delano Peak, which is just the next step up right from that. And I definitely found myself wondering, like, oh boy, what if it had like a Marzocchi suspension package, right? Or a comparable RockShox, you know, X-Fusion type package. I would have really liked to have seen Marzocchi on there personally, because I feel like that would have really made that bike awesome. But again, it could have just been a bad unit.
Yeah, I've enjoyed other DVO units in the past more than I did these. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if an upgrade on the suspension or just fixing what was on it would have helped the performance.
Yeah. So I think, you know, with that aside, the bike is fun, playful, capable. I agree with you. I think that bike's the best pedaler. And if I were putting miles on a bike, I think that suspension platform is very solid and you know, really solid there. And also a playful bike, like close to the Marin, I would say, in terms of like getting it around and kind of snapping and putting it up places that you want it to be on the side of a bank or whatever. But
yeah, like you say, fairly solid pedaler and descender. It was just let down by the suspension a little bit, but the rest of the spec I think is really good and maybe my favorite overall spec of the bunch. Doesn't matter how much you spend on a bike, it still sucks to push up a hill.
I don't know about these guys, but if this bike cost $10,000 instead of under $2,500, I could have climbed up that so fast. I wouldn't even be out of breath. What were some of the big takeaways, good and bad, like things that you learned, new experiences you had, observing, touching, riding bikes at this price point? Sean?
Well, I mean, I said it last year, where no buyer's remorse, essentially. Like, there's so much more fun to ride, and this year just reaffirms what I've said the last couple times we've done this, is that it's just way more fun to ride than some of the $10,000 counterparts that we get.
Okay, Robert?
Yeah, I don't know about more fun to ride personally, but definitely not fun to ride.
Okay.
Like, for what is, you know, compared to some of the stuff that we get in quite a small amount of money, like, we still had an absolute riot on these things.
Absolutely.
Plenty of smiles when we're out testing them. Not too much to frown about, and they've all held up pretty well.
Yeah, that, to me, that's one area where I would love to see, and I don't know why I keep looking at these wheels on the GT, but I just feel like they just don't look like they're gonna last, I don't know, 8 months underneath someone like yourself, right? Like,
Right.
And that, but again, if you're into this thing for under $2,500, you can buy another wheel set for $500, and you're still out the door for less than $3,000, right?
It's a hard one to balance because you've got bikes like the Trek with a burly wheel set that is also heavy and really detriments its trail feel.
Yeah.
In certain aspects, certainly going up the hill. So, you know, at that price point, you can't choose strong and light. You've got to choose one of the two.
Yeah.
So GT's gone for a slightly lighter weight option. Trek went for the burly option. There's a compromise there to be made. I think I'd rather get on the GT knowing wheels are going to be a little bit more vulnerable and try and pick slightly smoother lines and have that more agile feel, personally.
Yeah.
Travis, for you, have you spent a lot of time riding bikes in this price range?
Yes, getting started back into mountain biking, definitely. I kind of like what Sean and Robert said. It's that same thing of, you know, and I think initially it's like, I want to be on an expensive bike. Inexpensive bikes are nice, but then you get out there and you're on these and you're like, it's still a bike. It's still very capable.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of fun, and you're out riding with your friends and hooping and hollering, and, you know, watching Robert push the GT down stuff that you're like, oh, I don't know if that's going to make it with those wheels, but
I don't think there's ever been a better time to be in the market for a sub $2,500 mountain bike. Like, you take any of these and you're not, you know, they're not going to hold you back from having a good time.
Sure.
Just all of them have their differences that are going to separate them.
Yeah.
What is the one thing for you that stands out the most that separates a budget bike from a $10,000 bike?
I guess it would have to be suspension, and more specifically, you know, quality control, adjustability, and, you know, similarity between suspension products, right? Like we talked about RockShox forks that feel very different. So, you know, there's definitely suspension products where I'm like, I've got this rebound fully open and it still feels sluggish, or I've got this thing closed and it feels like a pogo stick, you know, and sometimes that was on the same bike on opposite ends, you know, and it was just, so to me, that was a really big one. Yeah, I think the suspension, you know, is a huge one. From there, brakes.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sean, what's the thing that stands out to you?
Brakes and probably drivetrain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just on, or maybe not necessarily drivetrain. It'd probably come down to more just hub engagement.
Okay. Yeah, to me, that stuff's behind wheel and tire spec. To me, I would go suspension, brake, wheel, tire.
I'm probably the same. I can get by with any of these drivetrains quite happily. You maybe just don't shift them quite as aggressively, or you just accept that some of them are going to be clunkier shifts. But you can still hammer through the gears, and while it will clunk rather than like nicely transitioning from one to the other, it still puts the chain into the right place, and you keep on pedaling.
Wow. It's safe to say we've got 5 bikes here. I think that we would recommend any one of these bikes to certain people, right? Like there's not a bike here that we would say, don't buy this one or don't buy that. I think just depending on the rider's application and what their intentions are, we would maybe steer them one way or another. Why don't we maybe talk about standouts? Like Sean, if you got to take one of these home, you were gonna pull out your credit card and buy one, what stands out for you and why? You get two options. One is a hypothetical beginner and one is yourself.
And should we maybe even jump ahead of that answer by saying that we've got 4 trail bikes here and 1 enduro bike. The Colossus is the enduro bike park bike that all of us would choose, and is really sweet for what it is.
Problem.
Right? Just because otherwise you're going to get the same answer 4 times, right? So trail bikes, that Polygon is sweet. It is sweet if you're in the market for that kind of bike.
So we'll just pick that as the enduro rider's winner.
Yeah.
I think in current riding state, I would take the Marin just because it's more playful and doesn't require as many upgrades after the fact. And then for a beginner rider, I'd probably lean towards the Ari. As a just getting into the sport kind of deal.
Travis.
Yeah, that's actually my same exact picks. For me, I would choose the Marin. I think it, as far as travel goes, has plenty, especially for around here in Bend. You can get out and pedal on it, but also you can get a little rowdy on it and still be okay. And the suspension worked well. And then, for somebody getting into it, again, especially for here in Bend, I think the Ari would be a great option because a lot of our trails here, you're getting out and pedaling pretty decent size loops.
Robert?
I would buy the Marin.
Okay.
But I do love that GT.
So why aren't you going to pick it then?
Because I don't think it's as good.
Okay.
Like as an overall, the components on this aren't going to last as long. The absolute fastest that I could probably go compared to the Marin isn't as fast. And it's maybe just a bit less versatile overall. It's just not as capable of component spec.
Okay.
But it is just super fun.
I think Marin, and that's going to be my pick for sure. All the bikes stand out in certain areas and have capabilities that they thrive in. I could definitely see riders liking kind of a little bit faster handling and a plusher suspension feel that the Trek would offer. We've discussed why we like that. That I think is very clear. Ari, again, a great pedaling platform. Probably the best spec, I'd say, aside from that Polygon with that suspension package. But the Ari, you get a lot, and the fact that you can customize the builds as well. Like you can really, these you kind of have preset build options, right, and price points. And with Ari, you can kind of customize what you do and don't want and swap little parts out. So yeah, overall, I think we were quite impressed and surprised, I would say, as well throughout the course of this test. So it sounds like the Polygon is the, I don't know if we want to say unfair because it's the only enduro bike, but I think we agree for sure this bike kicks ass, period. And if you're looking for an enduro bike on a budget, that's the jam. Our favorite bike, sub $2,500 on the market right now, would be this Marin. Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay. So there you have it, folks. The Marin Rift Zone 2. The bike that we all decided would be the one that we would pick and buy ourselves if we're looking for a sub $2,500 do-it-all mountain bike. Not to forget the Polygon Colossus if you are looking more of a gravity, shuttle, or bike park focused bike in that sub $2,500 price point.
Well then everybody, that has been our 2024 sub $2,500 shootout. Hope you guys have enjoyed watching. We certainly had a good time filming it, right?
Absolutely. And once again, without your guys' support, your comments and engagement, and of course, the support from brands like Tifosi and Liat, these types of projects wouldn't be possible. So if you're in the market for some affordable quality gear, Tifosi's got some awesome budget-friendly glasses, and Liat's got some great gear to keep you safe and outfitted. So thanks to you and the sponsors for making this happen.